country. He's put his re-election over adding jobs and making the United States energy independent.
Fortunately for the Republican Party this year, probably anybody up here could probably beat Obama.
This is a president with the spy drone being brought down. He says, "Pretty please." A foreign policy based on pretty please? You got to be kidding. We have been kicked around as people. We are getting screwed as Americans.
Our only opponent is Barack Obama, and we need to come out of this process remembering beating him is what we collectively have to do.
Well, I'm counting on the people of Iowa to catch fire for me.
I hope I am the Tim Tebow of the Iowa caucuses.
Some sights and sounds from last night's debate, the final debate before the Iowa caucuses January 3rd. I think the biggest loser might be that sound, the ding. We're going to work on that. We'll see. Let's bring in our panel. Fred Barnes, executive editor of the Weekly Standard. Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill. And David Drucker, reporter for Roll Call. Besides the loser of the ding, because we had to use it so much, and frankly the candidates disregarded it. We might have to have a foghorn or something. I don't know. David, your thoughts about the debate and how things played out?
Well, I'm a big fan of the electability question because even though it appears unseemly and useless to only talk about winning, you actually can't govern or do anything unless you win. So might make me a D.C. insider, but I thought that was a great way to start. And I'd say Mitt Romney had a great night because he didn't stumble when Chris Wallace asked him about his flip-flopping on social issues. He may not convince anybody, but he wasn't whiny. He didn't shift. He just explained himself. It was a lot better than he did in the interview with you on the health care question. I'd say the big loser is Ron Paul. He started out fine. Fiscal issues, great. Criticizing Newt Gingrich on the judiciary reform plan, great. Foreign policy, a big, huge problem, and he doubled down. And I think part of the problem for Ron Paul is that he doesn't just espouse a different point of view. He tries to tell everybody there's nothing to worry about. And I don't think, especially for Republican primary voters, he can ever get past his particular ceiling, which has grown a bit, which is why I thought it was worth saying this was a losing proposition for him, because he's shown an ability for the first time to really catch fire. The last thing I'd say is Newt Gingrich started out tough, and I think the debate showed there is a line of attack on the Freddie Mac issue that can be problematic, but he recovered quite well, and he was able to get over some of his own issues to at least shine and remain in the game.
Yeah, Newt Gingrich had a number of applause lines as well as some of those back and forth on attacks. Juan.
Well, I think the consensus in Washington political circles today is that there were three people who've come out of this looking like they have a chance to win the Iowa caucus, and that would be Romney, Gingrich, and Paul. Rick Perry, I think, is kind of in the middle, you know, very much entertaining the thing about Tebow is certainly the line out of the whole debate. But then there are three people who came out as now, you know, also Rands, and it looks like, remember, Perry has money. I should also say that's a reason for him being on the line. But the people who lost out clearly were Santorum, Bachmann, and Huntsman.
Although some people say Bachmann had her best night.
She might, but it didn't matter at this point. She doesn't have any momentum. She doesn't have any money. She doesn't have much organization. And she's in the state, Iowa, where she would have the best chance to win. I think, though, essentially Gingrich, because he stirred passion on the pipeline discussion, on the court discussion, he gave them red meat. I think a lot of people, especially Tea Party people, are now having a second look at Newt Gingrich.
Fred, I mean, he covered the waterfront. I mean,
yeah, he did. I didn't think he had a very good debate. You know, look, he protests too much about, I never lobbied. You know, under any circumstances, I never lobbied. Obviously, that issue's hurting him, or he wouldn't have to say that so much. And maybe the crowd didn't cheer on that. Look, the reaction of the audience, who could care less if you throw red meat to them? I think the judges issue is one that is not going to help him. I mean, calling up judges to testify before Congress, and if you don't like it, you know, closing down their entire appeals court circuit. I mean, I forget who asked that.
That is in a long paper that Newt Gingrich has written, and it says just that.
Yeah, was Megan the one who asked that question? You know, that was a great question because that was an issue that nobody talked about or thought about for some years, and it certainly didn't help Gingrich. Romney was good. I agree with David. Romney was good, but he's always good, and it doesn't help him. You know, he still stays at, you know, a little over 20%.
What struck us sitting at that desk was that at the beginning, how unwilling to engage each other, all of the candidates were. I mean, clearly there was a consensus in that room that this was not going out of the gate an attack mode, that somebody said, you know, we need to go to a different level.
No, Michelle Bachmann got over that pretty quickly.
Bachmann and Ron Paul did Mitt Romney a huge favor because he didn't have to attack Newt Gingrich to try and get back to where he'd like to be or in the driver's seat. They did all the work for him.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's interesting to me because I would have guessed that they would have been fighting each other or taking each other out in this debate. That's not the case. Here you had a situation where for Mitt Romney it was about reassuring voters about his brand. He's not exactly very exciting, but he says he's highly competent, he's produced jobs, he's worked with a mostly Democratic legislature in Massachusetts. And from the Newt Gingrich side, it's I'm Ronald Reagan. Don't forget, people underestimated Ronald Reagan. They didn't think he could beat Jimmy Carter. They didn't think he was conservative. They thought he was too wild, and he did great.
You know what?
Just because Ronald Reagan was unelectable doesn't make every Republican after him who's unelectable Ronald Reagan.
Right, yeah. No, he's not Ronald Reagan, and Rick Perry's not Tim Tebow. But I like Tim Tebow.
Let's talk about this this moment that David brought up and the back and forth about Iran. Take another listen to that clip.
But to declare war on 1.2 billion Muslims and say all Muslims are the same, this is dangerous talk. Yeah, there are some radicals, but they don't come here to kill us because we're free and prosperous. I think this wild goal to have another war in the name of defense is the dangerous thing. The danger is really us overreacting.
The problem would be the greatest underreaction in world history if we have an avowed madman who uses that nuclear weapon to wipe nations off the face of the earth.
And you're saying that that exchange has some resonance?
I think it's a problem for Ron Paul, and I think when he was more of a fringe candidate, who cares what he had to say? But when he starts to resonate, but he doubles down on his foreign policy, I mean, look, he might as well have gone up there and said that the rich aren't paying their fair share, it's time to raise taxes. I mean, the audience would have been aghast. And for Republican primary voters, if you're going to make the case to adjust U.S. foreign policy, there's a way to do it. And you may have some receptive ears, given what we've been through over the past decade. But using MoveOn.org talking points is not the way to do it.
David, he is who he is. I mean, that's the real Ron Paul. I mean, I don't think that anybody has said declared war on 1.2 billion Muslims, as he said. But, you know, look how excited he got about that issue. I mean, I thought he was going to have a stroke at one point. You know, he's waving his arms and so on. But look, I give Ron Paul credit for at least being true to himself and what he believes. It's harmful in a Republican in the caucuses and primaries, and it means that ultimately he is a fringe candidate, no matter how well he does in Iowa. But it was a strange moment.
But I'll tell you, Juan, being on the ground, it's clearly the most organized campaign. People are clearly fired up about the campaign, anecdotally, when you talk to people around the state. So does this hurt that momentum?
Not with Ron Paul people. I got to tell you, Ron Paul people are true blue, and they love Ron Paul and his libertarianism. And I know that Ron Paul not only has the organization, but he has the money right now. He's running ads in Iowa very strong, attacks on Gingrich, in fact, for the most part. So I don't think it's going to impact the outcome in Iowa. But you get out of there, you get towards, now remember, he was building momentum in New Hampshire. I think it could have some kind of negative effect there among a different electorate where he's not as known and hasn't been working as hard.
We should point out there's a lot of retail campaigning going on. Perry doing a bus tour, Michelle Bachmann, 99 counties on a bus tour, and of course Rick Santorum has been in a lot of living rooms in Iowa. Next up, former Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives accused of fraud.